Hi, everybody. I'm Vincent Van Ho, and today I'm bringing you a special series that we're calling Behind the Code. In this series, that we are going to bring you guys a secret sneak peek of the world of Dark Times. And today I have with me Miles, our lead game developer. And today we're going to go ahead and take you on a little journey of what goes on behind the scenes at Dark Times. On this first episode, the vision for Dark Times. We are going to showcase the origins of Dark Times and its creative inspiration, highlight the development journey, including the changes and evolution, and set the tones for the series, focusing on the game's unique identity. What was the vision for Dark Times, and how has it evolved during the development process?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Something that we've spent actually a lot of time working on. We have a lot of various inspirations, but one of the big things when Big Kids came to us was this idea of a fantasy game, dark fantasy experience. And when we looked at it, I started to take a look at dark fantasy movies and books and literature, and you start to see things like when we look at things like Conan, it's not really dark fantasy, but we can go back and place it in this kind of tone of this immaturity. And I'm going to talk about immaturity a little bit later, but really this idea of having this dark fantasy experience similar to The Witcher, and there are a lot of humorous moments in The Witcher, but just capture that bit of it, right? Not the full experience, but just this one little bit that when you feel it, it's got a big impact on you. And so that really led me down looking at a lot of experiences that almost, if we think about it as a style, it's an abridged way of digesting an experience. And we think about that for a second, an abridged way of dissecting or taking in an experience. We think about stuff like comic books, right? Or we think about experiences that we might find in like wrestling, a very quick promo that's cut in like 5 minutes. I'm going to take you out at the next pay-per-view, right? And then that's it. That's all it's an abridged storyline. And I think that somewhere along the line, when I was looking into these games, and we looked at, Baldur's Gate, I looked at Diablo, a lot of really great fantasy experiences. But we also looked at games like Gang Beasts, and I looked a lot at Yuke's stuff with SmackDown and SmackDown versus Raw, and the things they were doing with the wrestling games back then, and this feeling of giving you total, I'm going to say role play, but really when we're looking at agency and giving control to a player, it's really allowing them to role play a lot better. And, just to give an example of a scenario in, I think it was SmackDown vs. Raw 2007, you could walk up to the railings, grab a poster or a sign that a fan was holding and like rip it up. That's how much agency they gave you in those games. You can't do that in the latest WWE 2K24, right? So really for us, what inspired all of this was when we looked back at these older games to try and grab inspiration from old fantasy, what we really found was these really great mechanics that are very systemic and very immersive in how you can combine them. And that really gave inspiration to the mediums that we looked at, like wrestling, where you can pull a chair out from under the ring, right? Or pull out a ladder from under the ring. You don't really know, it's just chaos. And it's creating that exact feel that we want when you jump into the Dark Times and you enter the arena that first time. That chaos that can come from this experience, you want to be able to feel that from the beginning. And so, yeah, a lot of that inspiration was driven from, those initial fantasy games, but then really looking at these really great fighting experiences and abridged experiences like comic books.
Oh, I love that so much. Like, as a gamer, right? Getting to hear like some throwbacks from your favorite games or hearing that it came from like the nostalgia of comic books is such an exciting thing to hear. And to hear that you guys did a lot of research and looked into older games, like in Dark Times, we can grab a barrel and just smack down that onto somebody. And hearing that had some influence from previous games in the past is such an exciting thing. And to think that we're like evolving nostalgia in a way now and bringing that into like our adulthood is such an exciting thing to think about. Were there any major shifts in the directions during development? And if there were, what did you guys have to face?
Yeah, definitely. There were a lot of shifts in development. I think once we understood what this vision was and what we needed to do to move it more towards this feel, there were a few things that we kind of needed to change under the hood. One of the big ones was it was a single player experience initially, and we had a much bigger story in terms of a plot and things like that, and varying characters. And while we still wanted to keep the lore and make sure that the game is still set in a world that feels real, we didn't want to make things feel scripted, right? And again, trying to move more into that kind of old school, let you role play it how you want. And we didn't want to shoehorn you into a linear style of an experience. And so really played into making the narrative feel just as non-linear as the gameplay. And so, we'll look to other ways to tell you that story, whether that be through the website, or maybe you might find scripts or pages as you're playing to collect them. So we're looking at other ways to really tell that story, and not really through cutscenes and things like that. And so that was one of the bigger changes, is to the narrative that we made. And then, of course, I mentioned single player to multiplayer. That was a huge kind of change for us, from moving from something that was a bit more MMO in scale in terms of the way that the world was designed, to something that now feels, and we really like the open world nature of what we were doing initially. But when we had a look at games like Battle Royale experiences like PUBG, and a lot of people will say Fortnite, I don't really like to reference it because the tone is different. It is more of a serious kind of thing. And so rather than having this big open world that we dwindle the numbers, we give you 36 players in a tournament, multiple matches, multiple rounds, and you need to win and progress through the rounds until you make it to the final round of the tournament and potentially win some money. So, we did a lot of work with how could we still take the essence of the open world and how could we distill it down into something that was more bite-sized. So that change from single player to multiplayer meant that we had to look at features and mechanics in this different way. And that leads to like the combat. A lot of combat changes. It's multiplayer. You got to think about network and the lag that can be caused from sending over physics or ragdoll physics over a network. And so a lot of just work went into making sure that the back end felt solid enough that we could start to move across a lot of the single player stuff to a networked environment. And we didn't want to just go, here's a crap load of mechanics from single player, let's just throw it all over the network, because that's when you get a lot of mess. So we're trying to make sure we go through layer by layer, and let's bring in this feature, let's put in blocking. Is there lag on that? Yes, there is. Let's remove that lag. Right now we know what it actually feels like. Let's now tune that. Is there too much defense stat on it? Let's reduce it because it's too powerful. Like this like back and forward thing over a network, that needs to be smooth first, right? So you need to eliminate the lag so that you can go back and forward and adjust numbers to that level. And so these were a lot of big changes that we had to make fundamentally at a base level so that we could set up a rapid iterative process moving forward with the game. Our intention is always to get feedback as soon as we can, get this to people, get feedback immediately, and just make the game better based on that feedback.
That's really exciting. I had no idea that Dark Times started off as a single player concept. How will Dark Times set itself apart from other games that are also in this genre class?
Yes, another really good question, and something that I kind of hold myself to as a standard as a game director is trying to make sure that what we build isn't just something that we're just taking from other things. And one of the biggest things is that we are a game first studio. We are a traditional game studio that has moved into Web3, that is looking to make games from a game first perspective. We are just not into the whole, here is a bank and put in some money and then see what happens in the next few years or so, right? That's what every other Web3 company is doing. And so I think a lot of Web3 studios might not be utilizing Web3 in the way that really makes it different, right? So you own what you make in Web3, right? So this notion of like buying an item for a couple bucks, like a traditional in-app purchase, it's not something that we like to look at as a model. That might be there because it's, Web 2 game, it might need to have those things. But we are trying to really utilize Web 3 and allow these tournaments to be played and allow you to win money from these tournaments and spend that money on investing back in yourself as a competitor and as an athlete in the experience, and improving yourself in terms of your abilities, the weapons that you pick, your loadout, and how you approach the meta going into a tournament. How else could we analyze to get the correct features, right, for this thing? And so we looked at just this thing of when there was a point at which immature content became mature. We can point out a lot of examples, but I'm just going to single out Christopher Nolan's Batman for this one. But, Christopher Nolan's Batman was trying to take something at a fundamental level. We can call it a story, but I want to go more into style and stylistic things like medium, right? Yeah, the medium itself. Because now we're talking about an art form. And we're talking about an art form, when you think about something that is like a battle royale and you're looking at data, it's not giving you too much information. When we look at something like Batman, the new Batmans, we can see that it's gone for a more mature route than the original comic books, right? That were made for more kids. Even when we had the 1960s Batman on TV, that was still presented in a way that was easily consumable by children. Even the way that the characters were presented were more over the top, more stereotyped, right? Or more of a characterization. But if we think about drama as a medium, it's supposed to be over dramatized, right? That is what makes it that medium. When we look at theater or stage play, we want to see the actors acting in an over the top way. That's part of the style. When we read a comic book, we want it to be immature. It reminds us as adults what it was like being a kid. That's why we read comic books. There's no need for us to make Batman really mature, where now we kind of enjoy the stupid parts of it, right? We want it to just be fun, something you could jump in, play over and over, and it feels good to play. And we looked at things like Gang Beasts. We looked at a lot of these kind of fun pick up and play games that you can play constantly, and it needs to feel different when you play it. And one of the biggest games that really allows you to have complete agency is Breath of the Wild of recent memory, right? I regard that as one of the best technical games ever designed. I think the reason why is it models something that's very important in real life. It models physics and chemistry in the game, and it works with the character controller. Character controller is just the actions that are available to the player: run, jump, all of those things. That controller is supported by the physics and the chemistry, and if they can all link together, that's when you start to get some really different emergent things happening, that where no experience ever feels the same, right? In Breath of the Wild, you could take an arrow, character controller, fire it through fire chemistry, right? Have that hit an enemy that has ragdoll physics, hits him down a hill, and have him hit a bush that also catches on fire. We've now combined the chemistry, physics, and the controller in this very systemic way. This is a core fundamental pillar to the way that we have approached combat in Dark Times. We combine this abridged structure of the Battle Royale, but in 4 rounds of this engaging tournament. When you abridge it that way, it needs to have a lot of replayability. And then we looked at things like wrestling to try and get the replayability in the stipulations, the match types, and those types of things. That's what we're really looking at, is we have survival as the first kind of stipulation. 12 people, most kills moves on, right? Then we have team-based stipulation. The next round might be a team-based, right? And now it's 3v3. So we play around with the rule set to make it feel different each time. So I think for us, we're really excited about that, creating a tournament that you can play and win real money through Web3 and have it be secure and have it be an actual investment, and then making sure that that structure is supported with a really solid combat system where we take inspiration from a lot of the big systemic experiences and a lot of the big abridged experiences that we might have played or consumed when we were younger. And so, all of this stuff we're talking about, this is the vision that we have for this game that we've been working on, right? And we really are looking to the people to actually give us that feedback and work with them to make the game as good as it can be. And for us, it's trying to make something that's very different and not like a Web3, like every other Web3 game out there. So I think that for us, it's giving that value to people and working with the people to make it, because Web3 is all about ownership, right? And this is the first step towards that, is actually devs working with the players to produce something together.